Another successful episode. What am I gonna play for Halloween?
What's that? Who's there? Oh, sweet! Halloween games!
We love games, and we especially love games that drag us kicking and screaming into their immersive worlds. It would be way too easy to do a video on legendary survival horror elites, like Resident Evil 2 and 4, Silent Hill 2, Amnesia: The Dark Descent, Clock Tower, Alien Isolation, Dead Space. While those games are beyond excellent, everyone makes a Halloween video with almost that exact list. I'm going to dig deep into my collection without making the same list that everybody else did. Let's start with 8-bit and work our way into the future, starting with the original Nintendo and the original Castlevania. The original Castlevania is a top 10 NES game of all time for many people, and maybe a top 10 game of all time for many. The creepy castle, lots of different monsters and ghost enemies, and some of the best 8-bit music ever written. Castlevania really sets the mood and has a difficulty that will make those monsters seem oppressively scary at times. I've never quite beaten this game. I've only been past that hallway that leads to the Reaper a handful of times, but I come back to it over and over. Compared to Castlevania, Ghosts and Goblins for the NES is even faster, has even more monsters, and is even harder. I love the series, but this is a game I've never made much progress in. Every time I play this, I think I'm gonna have fun, die a few times, get frustrated, and instead I end up playing Super Ghouls and Ghosts for the SNES. As a kid, I once left my SNES on overnight twice in a row to get to the end and beat this game. All the monsters and crazy locations make this so interesting that it's still fun when you're getting your butt kicked over and over. While it looks like a frantic Contra-style action game, there's a lot of calculation with every jump and throw of the spear. Maybe I need to do my first live stream. Maybe Super Ghouls and Ghosts on Halloween? That might be fun. The pinnacle of SNES glory might be Super Castlevania IV. I can't even begin talking about this game without gushing about it for at least 10 minutes. I've met people who claim this is the absolute best game ever released for the SNES, a lofty claim that might actually be true, but regardless, I'm gonna play this soon. If you love campy horror movies, Zombies Ate My Neighbors is your game. No other game does this better, and you can find this on both the Genesis and the Super Nintendo. This game looks cutesy, but don't let that fool you. As you try to save the humans, this game's difficulty ranges from moderate to crushing. As a kid, I was always sweating when the nearly invincible hockey mask chainsaw guys were chasing you through the hedge maze. You'll find possessed dolls, huge sandworms, mummies, spellcasters, a UFO, and a giant baby. For fun, and for double firepower, co-op is highly recommended. If you want a fun and campy game that's a little more casual, look to the Genesis for Haunting starring Polterguy. Don't let the strange title or 90s punk rock ghost outfit throw you off. This game is tons of fun if you have a dark sense of humor. As a poltergeist, you hunt down and scare Vito and his family. You scare them out of their house and follow them from location to location. You possess items around the house, essentially setting evil traps for the family. A shark comes out of a fish tank, walls and carpets bleed, toilets explode, corpses crawl out of the walls, the bathtub fills with blood, the Grim Reaper appears, monsters crawl out of literally anything. There isn't a ton of variation here in the gameplay. The music is bland and the sound effects all sound pretty much the same. Thank goodness it looks fantastic and it is so entertaining. Polterguy isn't the deepest or the most strategic game you'll ever play, but few 16-bit games will tickle your dark sense of humor quite like this will. Let's get into some disc-based systems with Doom 3. When I first played this game, a few things really stuck out to me. First, the weapons. Even your standard pistol has this amazing, visceral feel to it. I think mostly thanks to the sound effects. Every shot from every weapon has this hit that you can feel that seems to register inside your body. Next, this game is dark. You're gonna need that flashlight. And finally, these enemies will purposely spawn behind you as soon as you turn away. That gives you an unstable sense of insecurity, keeping you always on edge. You're never safe. The new Doom series is a ton of fun and has a lot of character, but I just never felt it had the atmosphere of Doom 3. I didn't know a thing about Hunter the Reckoning when I picked it up on a whim. The first time I put this game in my Xbox, I played it off and on all day and beat it the same night. This plays like a primitive twin-stick adventure-style shooter set in a world of magic and monsters. On the surface, it's fairly standard. Choose from a few different characters that play differently, carve your way through hordes of small enemies, go head-to-head with a few powerful enemies, rinse and repeat. Satisfying combat will have you tearing through multiple enemy types with a mix of melee, ranged, and magical attacks. While no one system got the complete set of Hunter games, the series has entries spanning Xbox, GameCube, and PS2. I highly recommend you dust off one of those consoles and pick up a copy of one of these games. Many of the games in this list deserve their own video, but maybe not as much as Darkwatch. Apparently, this game was hugely praised when it came out, but I didn't know it ever existed until one night digging through eBay in the early 2000s looking for cheap games to buy. Today, I don't personally know of one gamer who remembers playing this. What a shame. Darkwatch is a steampunky 1800s American Western first-person shooter, set in a smorgasbord of all typical horror tropes from skeletons and vampires to banshees and butchers. You end up joining the Darkwatch to stop the vampire Lazarus that you accidentally set free. Thankfully, you're given a double jump and other vampire powers from your encounter with Lazarus early in the game. Darkwatch feels a bit like Halo with a different coat of paint, which is a good thing. In many other shooters, the enemies don't have much charm and they're mostly just pretty paper targets. However, here, even the most common enemies are corporeal. Despite fighting hundreds of skeletons, they still look gritty and realistic. Combat with them feels delightfully tactile. Those flying banshee witch ghost things in particular will make your heart skip a beat every time you hear them scream into your territory. And not only do the characters look great, the levels feel unique and lived in. Everything is done with a huge level of care. The music and sound effects follow suit, especially the sound effects. I cannot gush enough about the sound effects. They really take you from a level of playing a really good game into making you feel like you're actually Jericho. Out of all the games on this video, Darkwatch was the hardest one for me to turn off. Out of everything in this video, Left 4 Dead has to be the one I put the most hours into. I can't quite put my finger on it, but I always come back to Left 4 Dead. Slashing and shooting your way through a nearly endless number of enemies is satisfying, just like a first-person shooter version of Dynasty Warriors. The atmosphere is creepy, unique zombies constantly hunt you, and it's unsettling never knowing when you're going to be startled by a witch, tied up with a huge tongue, or trampled by a tank. Although the sequel has more variation in the weapons, which was sorely needed in the first game, the levels feel kind of thrown together. The original is still my favorite and backwards compatible on Xbox One. I love games that are generally unloved and underappreciated, especially when I have a great experience with them. One such game is Castlevania, Lords of Shadow. I know this game was nearly finished when they decided to make it part of the Castlevania series, but that doesn't bother me. I love this for what it is, whether or not it's part of a larger series. This is essentially a horror-themed God of War style game. It looks fantastic, requires more combat depth than just smashing the button until something dies, and the horror element bleeds from this game. The attention to detail is epic, from the backgrounds to the foreground, and even the ground. It gets better with the enemies. Why haven't more people played this game? I had an absolutely incredible experience with this years ago, and I've been itching to replay it ever since. What's scarier than that girl from The Ring? Not much. F.E.A.R is a game that escaped me for a very long time. In my teens, I was super excited to try F.E.A.R and borrowed it from a friend of mine, only to find out that my computer could only handle it around 15 or 20 FPS. I suffered through about 15 minutes of gameplay before my computer totally crashed, and I gave up. I played the sequel on consoles, but only recently circled back to the original. I very quickly saw why the original F.E.A.R has won so many awards. In the shoes of the point man for a special forces team, you fight your way through hordes of enemies. Add to that paranormal flashbacks, jump scares, and hallucinations. It all revolves around the ghost girl, Alma. Don't worry, I won't give any spoilers. The creepy vibe, haunts, and riveting encounters with Alma really make this game more than just a clone of every other PC first-person shooter. Just know that this is not a survival horror game. At its roots, F.E.A.R is a first-person shooter. It does this part very, very well. Stripping away the gore and scary elements makes the game look like a Counter-Strike copy, but looks can be deceiving. The enemy AI was praised at the time for being very advanced. Enemies have a large variety of actions like jumping, ducking, and even creating cover. They even have the ability to counter your actions by doing things like spontaneously teaming up while another small group flanks you. At its roots, F.E.A.R is a first-person shooter, and it does that part incredibly well. Alma and the horror coat of paint, just the cherry on top. The Wii is cheap. Wiis are easy to mod. Light gun games are fun. There are 2 fun Resident Evil shooters for the Wii, but they don't come close to Dead Space Extraction and House of the Dead Overkill. These are both on totally opposite ends of the spectrum, while Resident Evil both fall somewhere in the middle. Dead Space Extraction is a slow burn. The setup is pretty slow, but like the Ridley Scott Alien series, that slow pace builds a lot of tension as it reveals the story piece by piece. It feels more like a traditional game that happens to have light gun support rather than an on-rails action-packed shooter, especially since you have the ability at times to adjust your view, grab and interact with items and other characters. Like the original series, aim matters. Otherwise, you won't be able to keep pieces of enemies from getting to you. House of the Dead Overkill goes the other direction with over-the-top, campy horror themes. Also the gore. Buckets and buckets of gore. This is just dark fun. Cheesy dialogue, fast action, spaghetti western appeal, and mountains of zombies. I mean, tons and tons of zombies.
Because of the shocking nature of the following scenes, definitely not recommended for the easily offended.
This makes Left 4 Dead look like small bananas. Unlock the Director's Mode to run through the game holding 2 Wiimotes at the same time per character. Priceless. I pour a ton of time and love into my videos, and I very much appreciate you watching them. I'd love for you to hit that like and subscribe button, and to continue watching my content. Also, my next video will have details on how to enter my first big giveaway, so stay tuned for that. Until next time, thank you for watching.